Welcome to episode 25 of the PHENIX Investigations Podcast. In my opinion, this is our most exciting one ever because for the first time, I was face-to-face with Brian Bauer, founder and CEO of PHENIX Investigations, talking in real time. So excited for you guys to check it out. So Brian, I don't know if people watching know this. I have spoken to you for about a year. We've done 20 or so of these podcast moments from different worlds, different cities. You've been globe-trotting around, and this is our first weekend in the same room together, getting to know each other more and digging more into your life and your business. And I really wanted to take this opportunity because I haven't been the one interviewing you all week. I want to ask some specific questions and pry a little bit more on things that you mentioned. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
So I just want to start with the basic concept behind how I see your role at PHENIX and what your mastery is. So it's so interesting talking about your personal life and kind of the challenges that you put yourself through. You've hunted you've gotten kills for the 5 most dangerous game animals in Africa over a period of, over a decade it's taken you to do this, which is something that very few people have achieved. And you've spent your life professionally hunting the next difficult conversation. How do those feel as a parallel to you? Does it feel the same?
Yeah, I would say what it comes down to is hunting on 6 continents and dealing with snowstorms and potential plane crashes and getting bitten by just about everything that walks or crawls. What people don't understand, and I think the parallels from hunting to doing what I do and being a good investigator, is the experience in pulling that trigger is 1%, 1 second of the situation, but it's all the other complicated, difficult things that go into that. So it's the overall experience. So those things are very hard at times, and it's that mental push and that mental toughness in order to be able to really obtain the prize, right? And that's a lot in the investigative world, and it does get tough, and sitting in a surveillance vehicle for 36 hours straight, or peeing in a cup or worse, right? And so there's a lot of those things that you have to persevere, and I think that's being tenacious and never giving up is parallel to really getting the prize.
So just something that's really gotten into me this weekend is you're a unique type of character. Like you don't need to be doing this work anymore. You didn't need to build this house by yourself. You do these things for a reason. What is driving you to do this? Is it just always about the next challenge and putting something in front of you that you don't know if you can do?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can ask all my employees and they'll tell you the same thing. I'll say you're either growing or winning or going straight to the grave. And so for me, it's always putting that next thing and challenge, and what is everyone's personal Everest. We've talked about that a lot, and that perseverance. We live in a world where we just want instant gratitude over and over and over. All those good things that in life don't come for free, comes with hard work and perseverance, and our grandparents taught us those things, and it, although feels cliche, it's absolutely true. So if you don't have that carrot out and have the next thing to look forward to, I think you're just completely nosediving in the wrong direction.
I've been in marketing for a long time for like small, medium, larger businesses. I meet a lot of people, and there's driven people, and then there's people that are borderline insane, and you might be in that latter category. So when you get a case that is a Brian Bauer case, like something that is challenging, something that's unique, something that is of critical life or death importance, you're listening to the client, often for the first time speaking with them, and you're going in cold. What is the psychology of kind of absorbing their problem and creating the tenacity within you to go all in on it right away?
Yeah, a lot of times our clients are very good people, and then they were just preyed upon. And to this day, that fires me up to where, oh, if you got a lesser investigation or investigator, this individual might get away with it, but not on my watch. And you found the right person, and I'm going to go scorched earth and do everything, because ultimately what drives you is the difference between right and wrong. And to be able to make that right for the client, wear that white hat. And we live in a world to where not too many people are sympathetic to their situation. That's your problem, I got my problems, and this and that, right? And so clients come to us oftentimes with the most important burning thing in their world, and to be able to take that seriously, and it might be a snowflake to the client. It's something that I've seen in my 35-year career over and over and over. And so with that experience, knowing how to run that 2-minute drill, that 2-minute offense to go down the field and score, versus somebody that doesn't. And so resourceful, and the grind is, I think and certainly the experience is the most important.
So, we've talked at great length. It's unfortunate that you're not able to say the names or, put up the pictures of all of these, celebrities and public figures and athletes and these people that it makes sense that you would want to work with just for the, the thrill of it. But, even in our relationship, you've been generous with your time with me, and you have 300 investigators around you, and you don't have to do every case, but you work with everyday people, people that own a shipping company or a private individual with a child that's been lost overseas. Like, what is it about these specific cases that makes you flip the switch and decide, like, that's what I'm going to flip my life into right now?
Yeah, great question. I think it ultimately comes down to when it gets wildly complicated, and your bench is deep, but ultimately at the end of the day, there's no better guy to take it on the 2-yard line and go, and you have to score on that play. So I'm just cut from the cloth at the end of the day. If it's important enough for the client and it's complicated enough, still to this day, I want the ball. I want to go in the game on the 2-yard line.
Yeah, I guess it's a simple playbook of you don't want to lose the game with your best player on the bench. And it's just fascinating to me because it's such a unique personality trait to have the phone ring, have someone introduce yourself, have no connection to them, tell you a 10-minute story, and have you make that decision to drop everything that you're doing and take complete ownership of that person's problem. Because this isn't, you saying, I'm going to skip lunch and make a phone call. It's often, I'm going to cancel plans for Christmas and fly to Dubai. It's an incredible mentality. Is there something that led to this, or is that how you've always been?
I think it's in a lot of professions, right? Whether it's a doctor and you've performed 1,000 open heart surgeries and you've seen every unique situation, and although you can't perform all the surgeries, those ones that are the 1%ers and very unique, and I think that's with attorneys certainly and their specialty, and you look and say, wow, how can this individual charge so much? But they're so specialized, and it cost a lot to get that experience ultimately to resolve potentially what might be devastating to you in your own personal life.
It's interesting because, like, obviously we're all business people and there's costs and, business mechanics that have to be paid for. A lot of the cases you work are kind of the outcome is priceless. And, like, the example I always think of is, like, when someone's child is gone and they're overseas or they've contacted law enforcement and they're at a dead end, that individual cannot move on. There's nothing in the world that can change the way they're thinking until the case is closed. How do you think about the value of the work that you do in that context?
Yeah, and I can give you a real life example, but you run into these situations with the clients that they're just in quicksand. There's no way out. They don't believe that there's a solution. They're grasping at straws. And so not too long ago, we had a situation where the client called us in a panic and said that their teenage son left a note saying, "Don't worry about me. I need to go do this." And ultimately, we did the investigation and found that he was watching YouTube videos and wanted to go join some special forces team in the Ukraine. And so they were, of course, in a panic, and their son's off to war and it has no formal training and this and that and doesn't understand truly the life and death and what is surrounded by war. And he just had conviction that he had to go do it. And so we were tasked to try to find him and just ultimately give him all the facts and not even necessarily talk him out of it as much as just having all the information so he could make a better, more mature decision. So we were able to, after exhaustive investigative techniques, locate him in a youth hostel in Kyiv, Ukraine, to where we were able to use some of our assets on the ground there in an active war zone, find him before he was out in the wind on the front lines or in some military training camp. And we're able to find and ascertain over time that this particular group was recruiting young American boys to go to war, and if they died in battle, they were using that as propaganda to say, look, the Russians killed another a young U.S. Soldier. So the parents were in a panic, something that, of course, you never budget for in your life. But to your point, you're all in. It's your flesh and blood. It's your child. And there's nothing we wouldn't do for any of our children. So it was just, we were the fix. We were the company that had the skill set, came highly recommended. That's how they came to us ultimately. And we're able to ultimately find him, confront him, show him different things in the Ukraine and wounded soldiers and what happens and what this organization's about, and having ex-military guys talk to him, and ultimately after he weighed all of that said, "Now I'm ready to go home now." And so we were able to take him back up north, take him over the Polish border and drive him to the airport, and sat with him until we could put him on a plane and get him back safe and sound to his mom and dad. So ultimately at the end of the day, yeah, maybe we do lots of investigations that don't ultimately move the needle and matter, but that's an example that I'm incredibly proud of, and my investigators who worked on that and just did a fantastic job. And one will never know, but potentially we could have altered his life, and he goes on to do great things, and we changed the course of history just a little bit.
When you were, a 17-year-old kid in Indiana playing football, if you had said that that was going to be something that you would do later in life, do you think you would have been put in an insane asylum?
Yeah, a little bit, but I look back and I say, as a business owner and investigator, those things like football is life. You are going to get knocked down. Somebody's bigger, faster, stronger than you, and it's all about not getting knocked down, but how do you deal with getting up and dealing with the mental and physical adversity. And that's what I think that we're missing in today's society. And certainly I see that there's just many investigators that feel very good and comfortable behind their computer at a desk, but that most of the time is not going to get the result that you need. And so if you're not prepared to get your hands dirty, most likely the majority of the time, you're just not going to have the result that's needed for your client.
After spending, a few days hanging out and going through these stories, like, I have to return to my normal life tomorrow and I feel like running through a wall. How do you split your time between solving these problems for these people, living your own life and maximizing the end of it, which is something we'll talk more about, and helping train and inspire like the next generation of people under you? How do you think about time management in your situation?
Yeah, maybe that's a better question for my wife. But they say, you're married to your work. And so it's something that I've just always been passionate about. And there's not a week that probably goes by when I say, oh, I think that I've seen everything, to only be made a liar. Because somebody's coming with something crazy that I've never seen before. And that's ultimately the Rubik's Cube. I will say about investigations, I'm proud from a legacy to have turned that over to investigators that are, going to become me, or hopefully even better than me when it comes to investigations. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what else is there to do other than help others? So, I'm very proud of that fact, and it can be a challenge. I made a conscious decision early on that my children would not get involved in the world of investigations, because, as you've seen just this weekend, you can become jaded in life, and you look at life through a different lens, to where you're constantly looking at, what's the angle this person's trying to get over on somebody else? Here's what it is. And, oh, I have to put on my cape and save this individual from themselves to being preyed upon. And at times that's hard, and you paid skeptic. Sometimes I can be cynical and look at a situation much different than most, just because if you cut me open, you'd probably find the 1,000+ scars on the inside. Right?
You said something yesterday that I thought was interesting. Like, they're interviewing and kind of dissecting people is a lost art. And I remember you asking, we were talking last night about kind of our personal lives and ambitions, and you asked me a question about ask me, what do I want to do? And I froze. I was like, oh my God, I don't know. It was like, this guy put me in a pretzel. So I was thinking, oh, that is interesting. That is a deep interview. How do you feel about the next generation of investigators learning that lost art? How can you point them in the right direction to stop, to open past hiding behind a computer and go out into the real world and dig out information from people?
Yeah, I try first and foremost to encourage my investigators, flip the script, and you're that individual, and you need the life preserver, and look at it through the client lens and see what that would look like and how helpless you would be, and then what would you do if they were in that situation. So I try to coach through that lens. But what has stuck with me, I had a philosophy class I'm probably 19 years old, many moons ago. But Aristotle once said, would you rather live your life as an unsatisfied human or a satisfied pig? And that always stuck with me of most of us are going to leave this world never leaving a footprint, never leaving a contribution to society. So you must live your life constantly unsatisfied, or you're living as a satisfied pig, eating, breathing, not experiencing new things, and ultimately goes back to you're either progressing, winning, or you're going straight to the grave. So that's something that's always been my mantra and always stuck with me, that, I don't have much time in the scheme of things, and so what is my contribution to society?
I think that I respect it a lot, and something that I do is be open about mortality. What do you, in a perfect world, want your legacy to be?
My legacy is people sitting behind me, like Joel and others, who can feed their families, they can get better, they can help and assist, and having, dozens and dozens of investigators who are going to do the same thing and can help others, and hopefully that spider webs out to that they're just ultimately going to help an army of people.
I've heard, I can't remember where I read it, but I think there's a concept of you spend your life giving pieces of yourself to other people that they'll carry on. Is that in a way how you think about it, or?
Yeah, 100%. And probably the person that has sacrificed the most has been my wife, because I do get engrossed and I want to help others, and I sometimes sacrifice my personal life or her attention to do that. But at the end of the day, she understands it, and it's something that for me, I just don't think that I will just think any other way and believe in karma, and it'll eventually come back to you.
Is it that, whether intentional or not, you've just built a tribe around you of people that see the pride and valor and sacrifice and helping people? Because, I think an interesting way to think about it is, the Ukraine example you mentioned before, that might have cost you a week of your time, but it brought a family back together and probably saved somebody's life. Is that how you evaluate, you took philosophy, it's kind of utilitarian to sacrifice this for yourself, to give this for another?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there's the 1%ers that are out there that just will never give up. To hell or high water, they're just never give up. And I am cut from that cloth of, hey, if it's out there, the information's had, I'm going to continue to go until get that information. And that's the drive, and not knowing and having a crystal ball ultimately how it'll turn out. You can just lean on your experience, knowing that I know from experience, if you're tenacious enough, it'll ultimately pay off, and it has thousands of times before.
I've always been curious about, you're either here in your house in Florida, you're up in Indiana, and the phone rings, and someone you've never talked to tells you their story, their problem, their emergency. At what point do they feel the intensity? Is it an immediate thing where you feel you've talked to so many people and you can kind of read a room as fast as anybody? Is there something about the way that they introduce themselves, the way that they describe the problem, the quivering in their voice, that ignites this tenacity that I have to do? This is one I have to take.
Yeah, and at times it, like anybody, I think, pulls your heartstrings. And I just had a woman last week, that sweet Southern lady, calls, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get into my husband's phone. And you're immediately thinking, okay, this is another one of those calls where it wants to track. And she proceeds to tell me about she was love of her life. Her husband been married forever. He was in the military. They were doing a big remodel project, and they were so excited about it. In the next phase of his life, he has a phone that she can't get into, and I'm asking more, prying a little bit, because I think like, okay, well, you don't really have a right to get in his phone, where she proceeds to tell me that he went out to the front yard, put a gun to his head and shot it and killed himself. And so as she's telling me this story, she's sweet and sincere to where, one, there's mementos and photos and things of there that nobody else has. And two, from a closure, no matter what that is, and that she believes in God, and it's in God's hands, and it'll turn out the way that it should be, and that she felt like, okay, that's something that God's intervention and put me to her, and that's confident ultimately at the end of the day we're going to be able, with our cyber investigators, to get into that phone and give her that closure and those mementos. So is that something that I'm involved in every day? No, but hearing that story, now I take it as my personal crusade, and I don't want to have anyone else do that case without my oversight and making sure at the end of the day, come hell or high water, I got to figure out how to go ahead and get into that phone for her.
In hearing all of the stuff you've done, is 30 plus years of doing this, I almost operated under the assumption that to continue doing this, you almost have to be dead inside, but knowing you're not. You're very self-aware and under control in your emotions. How do you continue diving into the face of all of this stuff?
I think like anything is, when you get very good at something and you truly enjoy your profession, it's a passion and it's not work. And so at the end of the day, it's something that I enjoy, and it's like breathing air. I do it, it comes natural. I have lots of experience, and it's, some would maybe say, an illness that they just need to continue to go ultimately help others. And so it's just the unknown to get to the known.
That's interesting. That clears something up for me in the same way I was asking you, like, God, you've hunted a lion, these buffalo that is charged to you, that have killed more hunters than anything. Like, how do you ever feel that same thing again? And it's got to be the same with these investigations, is like the electric feeling of saving someone's son, or like unlocking photos and memories that a person wouldn't have seen before. It's got to be just something that gets into your bone marrow that you want to chase and feel again.
100%. And you can ask any one of my investigators, and I'll get texts or calls in the middle of the night to say, oh, we got him in the Ukraine situation, because with the 7-hour difference, and I'm getting texts at night, or investigators are coming into my office high-fiving me, and I'm saying, what's going on? And they're just passionate. They're saying, I solved the Rubik's Cube and I got it. And I think ultimately, to be a good investigator and know what those traits are, it really has to be in your drive and DNA to want to do that and have that passion. So it's not only me, it's any true, real investigator that will get that bug and wants to get the end result. And as we go through thousands of these cases, sometimes we're desensitized, or we might joke about it a little bit, whereas you're at a cocktail party, it's like, oh my God, tell me, what do you have going on? What's the next thing? Whereas we as investigators, it's just another investigation.
Oh yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm figuring out a guy who got his head chopped off.
Yeah. By a helicopter blade and was decapitated, right? And so ultimately, again, they're all snowflakes, but there's lots of similarities in how do you do it, how do you gather and get the best result for the client. And so there's different degrees, and I pride myself of being very good in my profession, just as you do in your profession. And all of those people out there that take great pride and is really their self-worth.
God, I want to close with 2 questions that might be long. So I want to start with, we'll finish with the highest moment and the most prideful. What is the lowest point in your investigative career? What is the white whale that slipped through your fingertips? Is there something that you look back on and think, damn, if only I had taken one more turn, or if the ball had bounced another way?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I certainly financially, I had a client that had over 2,500 locations, and they wanted us to kind of be that investigative loss prevention arm for all of their stores, and had it done. But they were asking me to do one thing. They didn't seem like that they were decent to work with, and they were asking us to do something that just I didn't feel comfortable with, and probably torpedoed it, but just, hey, I'm not going to sell myself out for this, and no, we're just in good conscience, we're not going to do that thing. So it still turned out okay.
Yeah, I would say so.
But ultimately at the end, and I think the older that I get, and those people watching that who are truly comfortable in their skin, the older you get, the more you're at peace with those types of things and decisions, to where it's very liberating to, as much as the client is paying you and wants you to work, it's very liberating to also be able to make the decision, well, I haven't made a decision if I want to work with you, right? And so it's perfectly okay if it's not a fit for that client. Don't put a square peg in a round hole, because I know 10 minutes later there's going to be another client that's going to have another situation that I can help them with. So the older you get, and my advice would be, don't sweat the small stuff, and know at the end of the day, if you're good at it, it's all going to turn out.
It is interesting, God, we've been talking a lot about philosophy. Like, when you're in that day and you're in that moment, you're so zoomed into this thing that feels like everything. I'm sure you were building your business, and those 2,500 doors would have changed your life. And you live in a gray world where there's a lot of opportunities to do the wrong thing. And obviously you've chosen the right way a lot of times. One thing that you said to me that is insane this weekend, is mind-blowing. You've worked with like 10,000 different lawyers at this point in your career.
I would probably say it's 100,000 or more.
And I mean, you could walk in front of a lawyer like a black cat and get sued, and you never have.
Yes, and that's something that I had an attorney once tell me, oh boy, you're growing and you're successful, be prepared to be sued. No matter what industry and what you're doing, the bigger you get, the more successful somebody wants to take you out, and having an issue. And then dealing with sensitive information in all of the hundreds of thousands of investigations I've been involved in, and my company's been involved in all of those years, and not to have that spin out of control where you're sued annually for those things is a great badge of honor, and I'm pretty proud of that.
I think it's unbelievable that over the course of your career, you've avoided looking into the camera and saying the names of the people that you've worked with.
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit last night off camera, and there's so many famous people and celebrities that ultimately you're just busting at the seams, and you want to tell that story because not only people can relate but know that individual, but also respecting the confidentiality of it, and that's unique and it's important to them, and confidentiality is part of that. And so it kind of comes with the territory, but if I could probably tell all those stories in the individuals, I'd probably be Bill Gates. So,
yeah, there's better people to be.
yeah.
So excluding, your family, which I think is a point of pride for almost anybody, what is the moment or the case or the employee interaction that you can look back on and think like that was one of the most moving, prideful moments of your career that maybe fundamentally changed the way you look at something? Is there something that you can look back on?
Yeah, I would think as a whole, I look back on in your early days, it was just cracking the whip, trying to get it done, right? Just a numbers game, to where as you mature more and more, you realize it comes down to your employees and your human resource, not the financial resource. And so being able to switch gears and mentor a lot of my employees and being able to help them a little bit and giving them kind of moments of encouragement. Have one employee that comes from a bit of a broken home and not much family around her and not much encouragement, and really took great pride in just poking and prodding her to say, what are you talking about? No, you're going to do this. You're going to do it well. Look, see, you can do this and you're not thinking big enough. And to where, as she's gone and just seeing her overall personal life and how well-rounded she is, that gives me great pride and satisfaction to be able to, touch those people that want to be able to be touched and see how they grow and open up, and all of those things. And so, I'd like to think that that's my little give back. And even at retirement, I think to kick the tires will be trying to mentor others. And I floated a lot of lead balloons and made a lot of boneheaded mistakes. And so if I can share and pass that along to whether it's investigators to educate them or just other entrepreneurs or business owners and, help them out, I think that's something that I'll still look forward to doing.
I'm not surprised that the most prideful moment wasn't something that had to do with you specifically. So it says a lot. I appreciate, sincerely spending the weekend, not just talking about professional things, like opening up and getting to know us a little bit more and being such an open book about, the life and times and philosophy of Brian Bauer.
Yeah.
A lot more surprises underneath between those 2 ears.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been some great team building and a lot of fun. And I wish everything that I did in the way of marketing was this enjoyable. So yeah. So thanks, and
Until next time.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot for watching. We really appreciate it. This is what we're thinking of as the end of the first era of PHENIX Investigations video content. We've got 25 great episodes in, got some great feedback, and you can count on bite-sized stories, more high-quality video, and behind the scenes of what makes PHENIX Investigations work all through 2026. So looking forward to sharing, and make sure to subscribe.